You are listening to Hit Play, Not Pause, a feisty menopause podcast for active, performance-minded women. I am your host, Celine Yeager. Each week, I bring you advice from athletes, scientists, researchers, and other experts to help you feel and perform your best, no matter what your hormones are doing. This show is a production of Live Feisty Media. Hello, strong, feisty women. Welcome to Hit Play Not Pause, the podcast where I absolutely will not be doing a cartwheel on the balance beam, but my guests might. So I have such a great conversation for you this week. A few weeks back, a veterinary surgeon in our community named Debbie Tacium reached out to me and asked if I would be interested in talking to an adult gymnast for the show. And she told me that at 55, she wanted to flip the script on menopause, and after suffering pain and loss of coordination and weakness and changes in body composition during perimenopause, she went back to the sport she loved most in life, gymnastics, and just wanted to use it to bring herself back to herself and remember what it was like to be a child who could fly. And I mean, all the yeses, right? But the story was even more than that. It's a story about overcoming all of the old garbage that has been instilled in us by others, especially as women growing up at a time when coaches were like, you've got to be as small and as thin and as light as possible, especially in sports like gymnastics. And also during a time when our physical health was barely attended to as athletes, let alone our mental health. Debbie has had to overcome a lot of physical and mental pain, both from her sport and her life. And she shares how hard those early years were for her and the injuries she sustained, and then how hard perimenopause was, and how she had so much grief in her life, not only from what she had gone through personally, but what her beloved brother went through in his life. We didn't talk about it in this episode because even after all these years, she still struggles to talk about it. But one of her older brothers was in a severe car accident when he was 22, and her mother took care of him for 32 years until he died at the age of 54. And her mother then died herself in 2020 at the age of 91, and Debbie was just struggling with everything, and she felt like she had lost herself. So she went back to gymnastics to reclaim herself and find her joy. And this is her story, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. All right, before we get to it, give us a follow on Feisty Menopause on Instagram and Facebook. Come on over and join our private Hit Play Not Pause Facebook group, and head into the show notes to click on and subscribe to my weekly Feisty 40 Plus newsletter for all the training and nutrition news you can use. Thanks, as always, for all the 5-star ratings and lovely reviews. You all are simply the best. Very, very quick thanks to MIDI Health for their sponsorship of this show and their continued support. I hear from so many of you who are having such great care through MIDI, and that means everything. So thank you, MIDI, for your support. Okay, enough of me. Let's have a few words about those awesome sponsors and get on with the show. All right. Debbie, it's so great to see you again. Full disclosure, everyone, Debbie and I spoke before about this topic, and we were both like, did we do that the way we wanted to? So we have come back because there's so much to say on this topic of adult gymnastics and gymnastics in general. And I have to tell you, Debbie, I just watched Rising, which is the Simone Biles documentary on Netflix. And now I'm really super stoked for this conversation. I'm all excited. I have always had, as I think a lot of people do, right? That's a big ticket to get at the Olympics and anywhere. People have this fascination with gymnastics because it's so like watching what people can do with their bodies in space, and especially at that level. But I'm honestly impressed almost at any level. Um, it's just really inspiring on a human level. And what I also thought kind of dovetails into this conversation, which we'll talk about, is that the documentary and Simone herself talk about, the story of how women's gymnastics itself has evolved over time, like going from a woman and a true woman's sport with women's bodies doing the beam and doing the things to that Nadia Comaneci switch where everybody became these very young almost starving looking young prepubescent kind of girls to now it seems like it's shifting back into a more healthy place. Simone herself was 27.
Mm,
So lots to talk about here. I really thought though that it opened up the conversation in my mind because you are now 55,
that's
correct?
right. That's
Correct.
right.
Okay. And you started as a child when you were when you were a child and then stopped when you were 14. And then at 50, for reasons we'll get into, you wade back into the gymnastics world. What did that, I have to think like what does it look like now in your body now to go into the gym? Like what do you do when you go into the gym?
Well, first of all, I try to get there a few minutes early
Mhm.
because I need to warm up before the warm up. I need, I need to get my, all my neuromuscular connections working so that, so that every single body part feels ready for this because gymnastics is a challenge for every part of the body and also the mind too.
Hmm.
So everything needs to be ready. And then, when all of the other adults show up, the other adults are, maybe 16, 18,
Oh.
20. A few of them in their 30s, a few in their 40s. And right now I'm the oldest, but maybe that will change. And then we do a short cardio warm up and some softer skills and a lot of jumping, a lot of running, a lot of plyometrics. Sometimes the coaches change it up and we do some drills and some games even, and those are a lot of fun.
What does that look
Sometimes.
like specifically? Are you tumbling? Are you bounding? Like, what are you actually doing? Soft skills.
Um,
What is a soft skill?
well, a soft skill is like rolls, for example, on the floor,
Okay.
like forward rolls. Other skills, they might be jumps or leaps or turns, high kicks, or as high as you can kick.
Yeah.
And just it's a lot of balance work, it's a lot of jumping work, it's a lot of neurological challenge too, because when you're turning or when you're rolling, it can be hard for the vestibular system to stay focused. So it can be a challenge too. Sometimes I have issues with some dizziness.
Yeah, I was going to ask
So
that.
yeah, so it's like any kind of skill that you can, or jump or leap that you can think of doing that it's not like too acrobatic is something. Are those are the things that we're doing during the warm up.
Okay.
And we might get into cartwheels and round offs and things like that in the warm
So
up.
in the warm up.
Yeah.
So, and a round off, remind me, is that no hands? No.
No, round off is it's like a cartwheel. It's like an
Okay.
same approach as a cartwheel, except you're kind of bringing your legs together in the air, and it's like a transition move. You're transitioning from a forward going move to a backwards going move.
Okay.
So you're ending up facing the way that you came from with your feet together on the floor.
Gotcha.
So it's a little bit more of an energetic cartwheel.
And then you specifically, I think last time we talked, you told me that you do cartwheels on the beam. Do I remember that
Yep,
correctly?
that's correct. Yeah, I'm getting them onto the lower high beam, and I could do it on the high beam if I really wanted to, but sometimes the mental challenge is a little bit hard because I'm not out there to like prove anything, and I'm not out there to hurt myself either. So I just really want to take things slow and careful, like.
Yeah, I mean, I get nervous just with you talking about that. So what is the, how high is the low beam?
Well, the low beam would be maybe 2, 3 feet off the floor.
That's high enough.
Yeah,
I
it's high
think that's
enough.
high.
Yeah,
And then
it's
how
high
high
enough.
is that high beam actually?
To be honest, I don't know exactly. It must be something like 4 feet.
Yeah.
Because when I was a kid, it seemed a lot higher, but now it's not because I'm a lot taller. Yeah.
And you had mentioned the dizziness. Does that go away with the repetitions and the warm up? Do you get better at sort of because I've noticed that even, I'm the same age, I'm 55, and just being on a swing for a bit
Mhm.
now, I find like I'm like, whoa, and I that is relatively new.
For sure. It's dizziness was something that I would say, like, even in my 40s, I would, experience
Yeah.
some dizziness, and it's something you can work on. Like there are neurological drills even that can be used, like putting your hand out or your arm out straight in front of you and just keeping your eyes focused on your finger as
Mm.
it moves from one side to another. And other things like bouncing up and down on your heels can take away a feeling of dizziness. So, it's definitely something that can be worked on and trained out of. And the more you roll, the more you turn, the more you twist,
Mm.
generally the your brain gets used to it, and you can train yourself out of it to a certain degree. Unless
Oh,
there's
that.
something medically,
Mm.
going on, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, we had a feisty menopause performance retreat a couple weeks ago and we did aerial yoga
Mm.
and I had never done that and I got seasick doing that, hanging and spinning and I was like, "Oh." And the woman did say she's like that can go away. Like if you
Mhm.
were interested in practicing and doing like the skills that you're talking about and just doing the repetitions and looking and doing all that. She said she used to be that way and she's not that way anymore. So, cue to anyone
Yeah.
who's interested. I guess you can work yourself
You
through that.
can, and I'm really pleased with the way that, in my case, that it's progressing. That I'm less and less dizzy as time goes by, and as I keep training. So that's a surprise for me.
That's great. And
Mhm.
how many times do you go per week?
Well, my small city where I live offers adult gym classes once a week.
Okay.
So, like, if you have like another activity at that time, well, you have to choose. So it's like this is your chance once a week, and it's 2 hours. And actually, I just found out that there's a different group that's offering an acro gym class. So I'm, interested in starting that. Acro gym is more like it's less. There's less movement. There's more balancing moves. There's more inversions. Like balancing on your hands and
Mm.
press to handstands, one arm handstands, things like that. And there's progressions towards that too. You don't just, walk in there and, throw a
Yeah.
handstand. There's all kinds of progressions and all kinds of balances, all kinds of, drills and shaping tools that you can use to progress. But
So, how much time had passed since you last did gymnastics until you started again at 50? Because I'm thinking going back to the Simone Biles and the conversation around you know, it used to be these prepubescent girls and then they became women and they were done.
mhm.
How much time had passed for you? Because it seems like if you stopped at 14, then there was a lot of time in between there, and nobody has the same body at 40 as they have at 50.
No, it was well, I like to say 40 years just to round it up, because
Okay.
I did go back when I was 50. That's true. But it was really short, and really, it was just before COVID,
No.
and everything shut down
Yeah.
after that. So it was just a few months where I was just kind of tiptoeing around the gym, just seeing what the equipment was and what I could do, which wasn't much. And so I really went back more seriously with a lot better equipped with better training tools when I was 54.
Okay.
So that's 40 years.
Yeah.
And also, to be fair, I did stop when I was 14, but I coached for a few years when I was
Okay.
17, 18 years old. So, there was a little bit of,
Still a
but
long
still,
time.
still a very long time, and so much water under the bridge too, in terms of what had happened in gymnastics culture to change it over the many years, and what had happened in my life too. So many things. So
Well,
there's a
let's talk about that. Let's rewind, as they say. So you stopped when you were 14. Was that because of puberty?
Yes, very much so. When I was, so we're going back to like 1983, and my gymnastics career when I was, a child, it lasted for 7 years. I started out recreationally, and I was at the first few years, I was kind of looked over because I was a really strong kid. I was very agile, very athletic, but I lacked one of the principal things that they were looking for in gymnastics back then, which was like flexibility.
Hmm.
And not just above average flexibility, but they were really looking for like extraordinary
Okay.
flexibility. And I didn't have that. I had, good flexibility,
Yeah.
but it wasn't like I was not a ballet dancer
Yeah.
by any means. So I was looked over for the first few years, and then for some reason I was, around 11 or so, I was noticed, and so I was kind of put onto a fast track. And at that point, they were really in a hurry to push me, not just me, but all of us, because we needed to like hit our peak before puberty.
Gotcha.
So there was a lot of overtraining. There was a lot of you know poor conditioning, and a lot of emphasis on keeping our weight down too.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. I was thinking about that. Why were they so interested in keeping us young and keeping our weight down and all that? And it was because to achieve the kinds of skills that they wanted us to do, there was a lot of spotting involved by coaches. So it was easier for them to spot very light children, just
Hmm.
to kind of, help us around in the air and help us, through skills. So the lighter and smaller we were, the better it was for them.
Hmm.
So the better it was for them, but not necessarily for us,
Yeah.
because each of us was an individual person with our own growth rates and our own muscle mass that we needed to develop. But they weren't really interested in developing our muscle mass. They were interested in having small, light people to throw around, basically. So once I started to um, get into these more difficult skills, there were a lot of issues. Like there was a lot of issues with air awareness and maybe sometimes poor spotting. So there were a lot of people crashing and getting injured, and
Were you
and
one of them?
I was one of them. It happened to me a few times, and I'm sorry, my cat's just
That's
trying to
okay.
get in here. So there were a lot of crashes, a lot of really bad crashes too that I had, including one onto my head. And
What happened?
well, I was doing a double back salto,
Which is
which is two rotations in the air.
okay.
And I just kind of either didn't have enough strength or power into it, or maybe I just pulled out a little early. And I crashed, pretty much onto my head, and I didn't feel too great. But then the coaching at that time was like, well, if you fall, you get up and you do another one so that you don't get too scared. So I did, and the second one was fine, but of course, I had all of that, adrenaline to get
Yeah.
through. And the next day, I didn't feel great at all. I probably had like a cervical concussion. And my mom rushed me to the emergency, and they put me in one of those neck braces. And I wore that for a few weeks and couldn't do gymnastics. And it was really at a period where I was just kind of getting into puberty. So I was having these growth spurts.
Hmm.
And so it turned into a vicious cycle of injury, taking off time from gymnastics, having a growth spurt, going back, getting injured.
Yeah.
And so I just had like a real series of injuries like that. And finally, when I was 14, I just had to admit that, my body couldn't take it anymore.
And
It
no one
was
is supporting you through all this, right? Like
no,
no one is trying to like help you
no,
strength train or do any of the things
no,
that no.
no rehab, no
Yeah.
strength training. It was just like either you're training full out or else you're, flat on your back, not able to do anything. And so by the time I was done, I had like some kind of a fracture in my thoracic spine, in a spinal process, not the vertebral body, but in a spinal process. And I was just like in so much pain that I could barely move. Um, it was hard to bend. It was hard, like I couldn't extend my back anymore. It was just like I was huffing and puffing through the day. And
And you're young.
yeah, I was 14. Yeah. But I felt old, like I felt ancient. And I'd, grown 8 inches in a year and put
Wow.
on like 30 pounds in a year. So it was just like, I'd gone from a child to a teenager, within the space of a year. Especially since everything had been like a little bit delayed because of the way that
Yeah.
we were
Yeah,
trained,
I was
when you're
thinking that. And once you stop, your body's like, time to grow.
time to grow, time to time to get this puberty done. So that's how it went for me. And so I stopped gymnastics and I was put into a back corset, just to
Oh, wow.
immobilize the fracture that nobody knew when it had happened. And so that immobilization weakened my back even more and set me up for a few decades of back pain that yeah that I had to
Wow.
deal with. Yeah. Nobody was helping me to deal with. In fact, we were made to feel at the time if we had injuries that we were like I learned what the word malingerer was when I was when I was
Sorry.
very young. Yeah. It was a nice addition to my vocabulary when I was, 13 years old, 13, 14 years old.
Did you
It's like,
understand what that meant? Were they
oh,
clear?
very well. Yeah. It was like basically you're faking it, or you're faking it, or you just want to take it easy, or you're you're too scared to throw this skill, or
Wow.
yeah. So, you know, as it didn't just happen to me, it happened to a lot of people. And it didn't really stop then. I think it got worse actually through the 80s
Yeah.
and into the 1990s and even into the 2000s. I think that was the culture. And really, I think things really only started to change in the 2010s and with new generations of coaches.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's a trickle down effect too. We were back in the 1980s, we were subjected to training methods that were developed, in the Eastern Bloc countries in the
Yep.
Soviet Union. And, their respect for human life for young girls wasn't great.
Yeah.
And we were at the trickle down end of this. So
Yeah. No, that there's a high level Olympic training camp sort of gymnastics center very close to where I'm called the Parkettes. And there was definitely some of that, back in the
yeah,
day that that I would hear about.
I've heard
Um,
of the Parkettes. Yes. Yeah.
okay. Yes, that's everybody has. So, yeah, I mean the culture is what it is. I mean, I'm curious, like I'm curious about a couple things before we get to if you picked up anything along the way after you left gymnastics. Like it sounds like it was pretty toxic, yet you never actually left the sport in your mind or in your,
Yeah,
you're 50 and you're still like, oh, I think I'll go back to this. It
it's
can't
true.
be because of the toxicity of it. It has to be something else that is drawing you to this.
No, it's true. And, for a few years after I stopped when I was 14, I was really kind of angry at the sport. And I remember angry watching the
Hmm.
1984 Olympics and just being really, pissed off about the sport and the culture and not really knowing why.
Hmm.
And, I went back to coaching when I was 17, 18 years old. And, I thought maybe I can, be, maybe I can do something positive with this, because gymnastics is a great sport. It's a complete sport.
Yeah.
It's like, in some ways it's the origin of all sports.
Hmm.
And, if you look at it a certain way, it certainly is. They used to
That's a great
call,
point.
yeah,
You
they
see
used to
football players
call,
hurdling people and tumbling and yeah,
yeah. I mean, even cycling, they used to call that gymnastics on wheels or something like that when it was, when bicycles were first invented, it was like a kind of a gymnastics thing.
so interesting.
Yeah. So it's a complete sport and there's so many ways to approach it too. Like there's not just the elite Olympic gymnastics way of approaching it. It would be like saying that, well, the only way that you can climb a mountain is, barehanded,
Right.
with no
Or high
equipment.
altitude with no oxygen kind
Yeah,
of thing. Yeah.
exactly. So, there's so many ways to climb a mountain and to get that experience of being in nature, And gymnastics is the same way. There's so many ways to explore movement with your
Yeah.
body and
Yeah.
it's your body. So, you have the right to do with it what you want and what you can. And
Yeah, that's interesting.
yeah, so that's kind of how I approached it as a coach. But then, life, took me elsewhere. And like I had mentioned, I'd had a lot of back pain due to gymnastics. And there was like a story that I was telling myself into my 20s and my 30s. It's like, oh, I have this back pain, it's because of gymnastics, because I had this injury. And so, I'm always going to be dealing with back pain. And I tried different sports. When I was a teenager, I tried diving, I tried swimming, I tried track and field, and I got some enjoyment out of those sports, but it was never really like gymnastics. And even going through my young adult years in college, I tried various other sports. I had fun, lots of fun doing them. Um, but nothing really satisfied me like
Hmm.
gymnastics did, even though I had really put that away. Dealing with back pain, though, it's one of my gym buddies from way back suggested that I try yoga.
Oh, okay.
This was maybe in the early 2000s that
So you're how old at this point?
I was in my early 30s. I just
Okay.
had my second child.
Okay.
And pregnancies, I had two pregnancies, and they both gave me intense back pain. Like I
I
can't
can
turn
only
over.
imagine if it's not
Yeah,
resolved and now you're adding that.
that's right. Yeah, so there were a few years where I was sedentary before I had kids. So the being sedentary and then having kids was really like a not a good combination for me. It just made my back pain like so much worse. It would radiate from my
Mm.
trigger zone, which was the fracture zone, and it would go down, it would go up, it would go into my neck. So there were a lot of really painful days or months. But when you're
You guys
young, you
take
kind of
medication? I mean,
no, I didn't really take any medication. I
yeah,
just kind of powered through it because
yeah.
that's how, I was kind of used to pain at that point. So, it was just like, well, this is how it's going to be. And, I'll deal with it. When you're young, you can, you have that energy of youth that you can just kind of deal with it. So, I did. It wasn't great. Maybe, if I had to do it again, I would probably, ask for more help
Yeah.
from, physio. But I didn't, looking back, I don't think there was a lot of
There wasn't that
tools.
mindset. Yeah, there weren't that many
No,
tools. So you try the
no.
yoga.
I did try yoga at my friend's suggestion. She gave me a couple of private lessons, and I really got into that. Like that helped immensely. Just, getting things mobile again
Hmm.
and being able to, do moves that kind of started me into gymnastics. Like even just doing like a trikonasa, the triangle pose is
Hmm.
kind of like, it's kind of like a cartwheel.
Yeah. Yeah. So
It's the
like
beginning of a
stuck in
cartwheel.
motion sort of cartwheel. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so
Still life.
it was showing my brain and my body that, I could move again,
Hmm.
basically, in ways that I had learned before. So I incorporated yoga into my daily life, and that really allowed me to be able to do sports with my kids,
Oh,
to be
cool.
active with them. So I was able to, participate in karate with them. I could, play tennis with them. We would go skiing, downhill,
Oh,
cross country.
nice.
Yeah, so I was, really active again. I didn't consider myself an athlete, but I was not sedentary at all.
It's sedentary. That's okay.
Sedentary. Yeah. So I was getting back into movement like that. But getting into my early 40s, I was actually feeling pretty good. It was, a really great time. And I was happy, I was active. But once again, life comes around and it throws things at you. There were uh, my parents were becoming very elderly.
Mm.
Um, they were both my parents were both in their 40s when I was born.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, so my parents, they were healthy, active people, but when they started to get into their 80s and 90s, they were having issues. And so, there was a series of deaths in my family. One of my brothers, and both of my parents by the time I was 50, and divorce and a
I
series.
imagine perimenopause probably comes in here too somewhere, right?
Well, actually, this was even
Oh, okay.
before all of that. So, I spent a few years, just in grief.
Oh,
And so, grief is something in itself because
yeah.
it's a tiredness. It's
Mm.
like a psychic and physical tiredness
It's a good way to put it.
yeah, that you're going through. And when you're healthy and when you're relatively young, you can still kind of power through it. But when things start hitting you physically, like in your own body and your own mind, that's when you start to become less resilient and you know, less able to deal. So that's when I started feeling symptoms. I would say definitely after 45. Like
Hmm.
I wasn't really feeling anything physically myself until after 45.
And then
So,
what did it look like then?
well, my first symptoms were like a chronic tiredness,
Hmm.
which felt like I had finished grieving, but I was still chronically tired. Um, I was like I had really low energy and I didn't really feel too awake sometimes. And in terms of my career, like I'm a veterinarian, I'm a veterinary surgeon. I was a clinic owner at the time, so I had a lot of work stress as well, and just struggling to deal with that and to be in shape for surgery every day. Like I say, I'm a surgeon. I do mostly spay neuter, and it's a high volume of surgery, and it demands that I'm standing up all day pretty
Yeah.
much, and it's physical. It's physical work. And like I say, I just felt tired, not awake. But what was really getting me to me was the muscle pain.
Oh boy.
Yeah, so I was feeling a lot of muscle pain, and it just felt like it was for no reason.
Hmm.
And so muscle pain, ligament strains, like I
Yep.
would strain my back, for not doing much, and my back would feel strained. So I would have these phases where I would be going to the physiotherapist, every few weeks and, just like trying to get it under control. Um, but what really surprised me was that it wasn't just muscle weakness, it wasn't just pain, but I was like losing like my neuromuscular connections.
Oh,
Like
interesting.
I was losing coordination.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'll give a few examples of the toll that it took on my strength. Purely strength wise, like I would be hauling these 18 kilogram bags of kitty litter into the house because I had a lot of cats. And well, 18 kilograms, that's about like 40 pounds.
Yeah.
And so I would have start to, feel like it was too much for me. So I started asking my sons to carry the litter bags into the house. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I don't have to do this. I'll ask them to do it. That was one thing. And then there was some of the sports that I had enjoyed doing with them, like skiing, downhill skiing in particular. I started to feel like at the end of the day, when I was on the slopes, that if I did like one more run down the slopes, that my legs were going to give out. So
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
afraid of
Don't do
getting
that. Don't
hurt.
do that one more run.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one more run
That
was
one more
just,
run. Everybody knows skiing knows. Don't do that one more run.
yeah, so I didn't want to be stuck up on the slope saying, okay, I have to go down, but my legs aren't there
Yeah.
anymore. So I just kind of stopped doing downhill skiing. I thought, well, okay, well, that's not too
Oh
bad.
boy.
I shouldn't complain. I've had a good run. My kids can ski without me. They're doing fine. So I stopped downhill skiing. And then um, I took a trip to Hawaii with my new spouse. And I decided I wanted to try surfing. And so surfing was, a sport that I had, always thought was pretty cool. So, and I'd always been really athletic. So I thought I can do this. So they said, okay, well, if you want to try surfing, the first thing you have to be able to do is lie down prone on the surfboard. And then you have to snap yourself up to a standing position. I'm like, I can do that. It's no problem. So I got down into a prone position and I tried to snap up and it was just like, what's happening? Like
Wow.
my body is just not responding. Like my brain is saying, do this, and
Right.
my body's not doing it. So that really threw me for a loop. Like that made me think, okay, what am I doing here? Like what is happening and why is this happening? And when did this start happening
Mm-hmm.
was another one of my questions. So so I saw my doctor. It's kind of hard it's a little embarrassing to go to see your doctor and, you can't say, well, I'm unable to go surfing or
I
I'm
can't
not,
snap up on the surfboard. I don't know
I
what's
can't
happening.
snap up on
I'm
the
getting
surfboard.
tired on the ski slopes, and they're like,
That's
okay.
right. So no, I had to come up with better reasons to, so I said, well, basically I'm always tired. I'm
Mm-hmm.
very painful
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just not feeling like
Did
myself.
you have
So
hot flashes or any of that kind of stuff going
not at
on?
that point. No, this was
Okay.
when I was around maybe 47,
Yeah.
48. And so the blood test revealed that I was, kind of hypothyroid.
Mm.
Not the numbers weren't very exciting, but it was enough to say, okay, yeah, you could benefit from some thyroid hormone. So I started that, and within 2 days, the muscle pain went away.
Oh wow.
So I thought, oh wow, this is significant because later on, I read that it's a pretty well-known symptom, like with hypothyroid, that
Oh, interesting.
like around the upper legs, around the pelvic girdle, and some people it's like chest pain, but it can be a symptom of hypothyroid, along with the tiredness,
Yeah.
the weight
Yeah, the
gain, the low
tiredness and that.
appetite.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So I felt a lot better on taking Synthroid. Um, but pretty much right away, I noticed that I had trouble getting the right dose. Um, it was always either too low or too high. It was never really just right on. And I would ask friends who were hypothyroid if they had that same problem. And most of the people that I knew with hypothyroid had been diagnosed a lot earlier, like in their 20s or 30s. And so they're like, no, I take this. I've always been taking this dose, and this is the dose that works for me. And that's and so that wasn't the experience that I was having. I was
Mm,
having a lot of trouble finding a good dose, and with my blood levels showed that I was taking too much, and if I reduced the dose, I felt tired again and painful again. So it was a struggle. And it really wasn't until I was around 49 that I started to feel some more classic
yeah.
peri symptoms, like the difficulty with sleep.
Yep.
That was a big one. And also hot flashes, which, just if you just take hot flashes in themselves, we all think, oh, it's not so bad. I can deal with this. And how long is this going to last? Well, who knows? But I'll be fine. I'll just deal with it. I would deal with it by if it was in winter, I would step outside. Like, I live in Canada, so if it was like minus 10 outside, I would step outside and I would immediately feel better. It would kind of like
But if you're doing
stop the hot
surgery,
flash.
you're not going to stop doing surgery and step outside.
No, that's true. And for me, where doing surgery, before I felt hot flashes, I had always been the kind of person who was always cold.
Mm,
So, I had learned to dress in layers and but after I started feeling hot flashes, the layers would come off and,
yeah.
it was very different. So that was, if the hot flashes aren't so bad, but the hot flashes with everything else are,
Yeah, and,
with
and women
poor
women
sleep.
are so willing to just put up with so much. Like, you don't
Yeah,
have to anyway.
exactly.
That
Exactly. And, I was talking to my mother-in-law the other day, and she's in her 80s, and she says she still feels them
I
sometimes at
believe
night.
it. Research is showing they last so much longer than they ever told us or that anyone ever thought. Like, it is not uncommon for women in their 70s and older to be having hot flashes.
Yeah, and we can endure it, but do we have to? Should we? It's
No.
that's the question.
So what did you
Uh,
do?
well, I was first offered some HRT by my doctor.
Mhm.
To her credit, she was the one who brought it up, and this was in 2019. And I was the one who was resistant. I
Mm.
said, "Oh no, I'm not going to be one of those women who needs hormones." And I just had kind of like an overall, not positive opinion
Yeah.
of it at the time. And I thought, well, no, I'm kind of afraid of this. I'm afraid I'm going to get blood clots.
Yeah.
I had had bad experiences with birth control
Okay. Hmm.
pills back in the late 1980s. And it was just like a really weird, probably idiosyncratic reaction that, probably nobody else really had, but I had it and it was my experience and I was afraid of taking exogenous hormones.
Was it
So
mood swings? Like what did you
no,
experience?
not even. It was just a really weird once a month reaction where I would start to like I would have like a massive attack of vomiting, diarrhea, and
Oh,
itchiness
wow.
all at the same
Okay.
time. And I ended up in emergency a few times
Oh,
with
okay.
that.
Yeah. No, that's not, it's just a mood swings. Yeah. Okay.
So it was just a really weird reaction. It would happen like once a month, like at the
Wow.
same, the pretty
Yeah,
much,
yeah.
on a cycle. And I never figured out what it was. I would bring it up with doctors, and there were theories, but nothing really. So once I went off birth control, I tried two or three kinds, and they all did the same thing.
Hmm.
So I just never took it again for, you know,
Yeah,
and
so I
never really.
understand like being a little reticent about taking hormones at this point.
Yeah, I was so I wasn't, I did accept the Vagifem,
Hmm.
it's like a little tiny
Hmm.
tablet, vaginal
That's
tablet.
just for, was that just local though, not
That's
systemic?
local.
Yeah.
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 So I took that, and it really didn't do much. It was, it didn't do much. It didn't do anything for hot flashes,
Right.
and it didn't even do much if anything, for the symptoms, that like the genital symptoms
Oh,
that I was
okay.
starting to develop.
Okay.
The genital symptoms were really only maybe the last symptoms that
Yeah,
came up.
that's common.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was, going into my early 50s, that I wasn't having like any urinary symptoms. My pelvic floor is really, really strong, but definitely genital ones. And those were starting to become a huge concern, because it was beyond the vaginal atrophy that, is so often mentioned, like, oh, dryness. And I'm like, okay, dryness. Well, that can't be too bad. You use, like you
Yeah.
can use the over-the-counter stuffs, but nothing worked in my case. And eventually I realized that I had something that was worse than just vaginal dryness, and it turned out to be lichen sclerosis.
Oh, okay.
So, which kind of makes sense, because I already had hypothyroid, which is autoimmune, and lichen
Yep.
sclerosis is also probably autoimmune.
Yeah.
So that's when I panicked, and it was like, okay, I want HRT like yesterday, and at the time, it was kind of difficult to get appointments with my doctor. It was during COVID,
Hmm.
and so I self-diagnosed with lichen sclerosis. So I wanted something like now. So I went to the private side of things, and I ended up with pellets, estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone
Okay.
in pellet form. And I hadn't, maybe properly done my research, but I took pellets for about a year and a half, and the effects were immediate, and they were great. I did not have any adverse effects with the pellets. I felt
So hot
great. The hot
flashes went
flashes
away.
went away like immediately. The lichen sclerosis started to get better pretty quickly. Not, I mean, there's all other treatments for that as well
Yeah.
that were prescribed, but a lot of my tiredness went away, and I felt so good, in fact, that after a year or so, I decided that maybe I could, start weaning myself off of the thyroid medication,
Hmm.
which I did. But unfortunately, that kind of came back, and I had to go back on it. But anyways, um, what I did not like about the pellets was, well, number one, the cost. They're very costly. Um, I had to go to a different city to get
Hmm.
them inserted. And also the insertion process was painful, and it caused a lot of bruising.
Was
And
it
I
right
was
in like your
afraid.
buttock, sort of like the glute
Yeah, up
area? Yeah.
the upper buttock area.
Yeah.
And I was, I would look at it and think, I wonder when I'm going to get an infection.
Oh.
So that's what I was really concerned about. So after a year and a half or so, I, went back to my regular doctor, and I asked her for all of the things that she had prescribed to me back in, a few years before, that I actually did not even remember that she had prescribed them to me. She had prescribed estrogen gel, transdermal gel. And well, I was already on progesterone. So
And the
yeah.
testosterone?
The testosterone, I dropped it. I did not, like I said, I didn't find any um, adverse effects from it, I don't think, but I didn't really feel like I was getting any benefits from it. So I dropped it. I mean, I don't know if like I see that it's become more popular recently, testosterone.
Hmm.
And I
I thought you
can
had
say that
mentioned a voice change in our previous.
not in my case, but I've heard of
Oh,
that
okay. Okay.
happening. And I was if I had known about that, if somebody had mentioned that to me, that it could cause irreversible voice lowering, then I would not have
Gotcha.
consented.
You had mentioned that to me because
Yeah.
even at physiological doses at the meetings, they're talking about some women do get a lowering of the voices. And if you sing, and I think you do
Yeah,
sing,
I
it
sing.
is a
Yeah.
concern. Yeah.
Yeah. That would have been definitely a deal breaker for me for
Yeah.
testosterone. So there was there were effects on mood, like positive effects on mood. But in my case, I think it masked some things. Like it masked my subclinical hypothyroid
Mm.
symptoms. So when I went off testosterone, that's when I started to feel the effects of hypothyroid
Oh,
coming
interesting.
back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. It's like
So
being a science experiment sometimes,
yeah, it's like
right? Yeah.
my own N of one, and I I'm willing to play around with things, but there's it's like you never feel like you have all of the information that you need when you need it.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
So what prompts you to go back into the gym, to go back into gymnastics? Now that we're like
Well,
through this journey and,
yeah,
you know,
that was a huge thing. And during during COVID, I felt a lot of anxiety and a lot of, a lot of negative things, a lot of stress and negativity. And like I said, I tried a session of gymnastics before COVID set in.
hmm.
And when COVID did set in, then we had a lot more time to be in front of our computers, and I just somehow drifted into watching a lot of old gymnastics videos
Mm.
from the late 70s and the 80s and that, and I was like, that was a real special time. It was there were things were happening really fast, and we were kids thrown into this experience, and we were kind of almost disposable at the
Mm.
time. That's how it, retrospectively, that's kind of how it felt. Like the young gymnasts of the time were disposable. Even the ones who reached the top levels,
Yeah.
it felt like they were disposable. It was like, you were good, you were good in 1979, but by 1981 you were done,
Yeah.
and so looking back at that, just gave me a lot of questions, and a lot of like questioning of the assumptions that we had at the time. Like, a lot of the gymnasts back then would say, oh, well, it's a sport for girls, and
Mm.
it's not a sport for women anymore, and
Mm.
you have to be young, and you have to be slim, and you have to be tiny, and that's the only way it works. Otherwise it just doesn't work. And those are false.
Yeah.
Basically, it's wrong. And I just started playing around with things in the house, and seeing what I could do. Can I still do a handstand? Can I still do a back bend? Can I still do the splits? Are these things that are possible? And with the help of yoga and Pilates and all that, yeah, it did turn out that it's possible. I can do these things. So maybe if this is possible, what else is possible? And so I just kept trying various things. And when things opened up again after COVID, I signed up again.
Hmm.
I had more space in my schedule. I had sold my clinic. I wanted to keep working, but I didn't want to retire. I wanted to stay strong for my work, for my colleagues at work, and they're all a lot younger than me at work, and I want to give them a positive example
Hmm.
of what that it's possible to age in a healthy way and to
Yeah,
stay strong and to stay mobile and active, because all of my work colleagues are in their 20s and 30s. So I'm really the old lady at work. And I want to be there for them.
that's really cool.
So yeah, so that was a part of it too. And just getting into something that, or getting back into something that was going to have a positive effect on my mood and my energy, my motivation to stay strong. So I went back in the spring of 2023. I started again, and I was stronger than I was, than 3 years previously. I had more strategy. I had more, um,
Do you
yeah,
also
I
do
had more core
traditional
strength.
strength training as well?
I had started doing
Yeah.
more and more strength training, like just a little bit more every year.
Yep.
And it was in 2023 that I read Next Level
Oh,
too.
okay.
So that was really a huge inspiration for me in terms of giving me strategy
Mm.
and like nutrition strategies and strength training strategies and um, even inspiration to work more on plyometrics
Mm.
because my joints have never been great. Like even when I was a kid, I had Osgood Schlatters in my
Yep.
knees. So my joints have always been a little bit wonky. And plyometrics is a way for me to strengthen those muscles so that the joints are protected.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
What do you think it has done for you?
gymnastics are next
Yeah,
level.
going back. Yeah. No, well, next level, I mean, I appreciate that. You've gotten. That was an unexpected plug. I appreciate it. But I mean, I'm wondering like now, you're over a year, you've been doing this. Like,
Mhm.
what has it given you?
Well, it's given me a new perspective on what is possible, on challenging my assumptions about what my body is able to do. Um, when I first started, I said to myself, okay, well, just don't push your, don't have goals. Just see what you can, just see what you can manage. It would be great if you could get a few of your old skills back. But don't think about learning anything new because you don't have that muscle memory that you can rely on. So more recently, I realized that I can learn new skills and new progressions, and I can have fun doing progressions and shaping and conditioning rather than just, putting together routines. Like, when I was younger, we would, learn skills to do routines. But now it's like the journey towards learning a new skill is the fun thing.
Hmm.
And the camaraderie in the gym is also very fun. I had that as a kid. That was something that I had as a child. There was a lot of camaraderie and a lot of
Yeah.
friendships. And I'm finding that again. People that I meet at the gym, can, be friends. And, so it's a fun way to meet new people and to, I'm learning to applaud people in their progressions towards new skills and to be amazed at people's, ability to learn things as adults. Because I
Yeah.
see many adult beginners, people in their 20s and 30s who are starting gymnastics. Maybe they were doing CrossFit and then they, decided to try gymnastics,
Yep.
or they were doing something else or cheerleading or whatever, and they, wanted to add some more acrobatics. So just finding something that brings joy, and while it's bringing joy, it's also bringing me some health, and it's building my body back too.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's cool. What are you working on? I'm curious, like what new skill?
Well, Right now, I spend a lot of time on the trampoline
Hmm.
because it's a fun place for me to be. It's good for my joints. It's good for cardio, a little bit of cardio because cardio is my weakest. Like
Yeah, you're a power athlete.
I'm a power athlete. I'm
Yeah,
not endurance at all. So, spending a lot of time on the trampoline, gets my heart rate up, and it works on my air sense too because you know spinning around, jumping around on the trampoline is good for my brain too.
yeah,
And the impact, and also learning how to fall safely, learning
yeah,
how to twist around and fall, and to use the trampoline to get height is a lot of fun. And so what I'm working towards on is twisting again, like a rotation with a twist. So, I've got the rotations down. I'm, trying to make them look better and higher. But I'd really like to add twists. I'm a little bit scared about it, but
when you say a rotation with a twist, I'm so novice. What does that actually mean?
okay. A rotation is like you start on your feet, you flip backwards, and you land on your feet again.
Okay, that's what I
Or
thought.
you,
Like that's a big
yeah, that's a
move, and you want
rotation.
to add a twist to that.
So I want to
Okay,
add like going twisting, like I'm rotating and then twisting around the axis. That's my body.
gotcha.
So that's a challenge for the brain to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
It's a
that's when you
challenge
say
for,
like getting lost in the air. That's what they call the twisties now, right? That's what
that's
Simone
right.
Biles was talking about in Tokyo.
Exactly. Like if you're just rotating, or if you're, just, jumping up and turning around like on your own axis, that's like a, relatively simple skill, but still a skill, and it still requires a lot of, mind body coordination. But if you're combining the rotation with a twist,
Right.
that's, a challenge for your brain
Yeah,
because
yeah.
you've got to decide like where you're going and where you need to be in the air and what you're going to look at, and, so that you can land safely.
Yeah. Wow.
So, yeah. And, not freak out in the middle of like not have like a brain freeze in the middle of the air. So, so
So for
yeah.
anyone listening to this now who is just sort of intrigued but has doesn't have any history in this sport, can they walk in and attempt something to do you think that this is a good thing for people to just I mean obviously not try on their own without any instruction, but what can somebody in their 40s or 50s or whatever, can they walk in and be like, I'm going to learn a little bit of something?
I think the ideal is to find a gym in your town or city where they offer adult classes
Yeah.
for beginners. That's really the best plan, and hopefully, it's not a guarantee, but hopefully the coaches will have coaching techniques where they can take people from the very, very start. But gymnastics can be as simple as jumping over a block.
Would
That's when you
parkour be a okay place to start?
oh, for sure,
Because I've
parkour
had a
is
couple of shows on parkour. Yeah.
yeah, parkour is we have some people, sometimes I see people in the gym who are parkourists, and they're impressive.
Yeah.
And that's, a lot of the gymnastic drills that we do look a lot like parkour too.
Yeah.
So parkour is just maybe a little bit looser. Like it's not the technique isn't as,
Mm.
gymnasticy. It's not
Yeah.
as sharp, but
I could
it's a
see
lot
that.
of fun to watch because people are a lot more relaxed in their bodies, and they still know where they are in the air, and they can, they land safely and all that. So parkour is a fun place to start too. But if you really want to, um, if you really want to work on strength and plyometrics and neuromuscular coordination and, mobility, gymnastics is the place to,
Yeah.
it's the place to start because it'll work on all of that at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's the skills can be very simple. Like you watch little kids learning gymnastics, adults can do those very same things.
Yeah.
It's just as hard for a small child to start gymnastics as it is for, a 50-year-old. It's the same learning how your body works,
Yeah.
And so there is absolutely no shame in starting from the very ground up. So there's
I love
there's
it.
something for everybody.
Yeah, no, I really love that. And I really uh, appreciate you sharing your journey with us because it's just, there's something the through line of your story of just like coming back to this thing that brings you into your body and brings you joy, I think is something that I want people in this audience to grasp on, whatever that looks like in their lives, you know?
Oh yeah, for sure. And it really does bring me so much joy. I hadn't expected that.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you so much, Debbie. I really appreciate it. And I wish you many twists and rotations in your
Thank
future.
you. It was such an honor. Thank you very much.
You bet. Well, that's our show. Come on back next week when I sit down with Andrea Donsky, co-founder of Morphos Inc., and menopause researcher and educator who recently published a series of abstracts in the journal Menopause, including one showing all the symptoms of menopause no one ever talks about. It was a super fun, informative conversation that you will not want to miss. So come on back for that one. And until then, as always, stay feisty. You've been listening to Hit Play, Not Pause, a feisty menopause podcast for active, performance-minded women. I'm your host, Celine Yeager. The show is edited and produced by the strong, talented, and amazing women at Live Feisty Media. Follow us on social media at Feisty Menopause, and please help us spread the word. Screenshot and share this episode on your social media channels with the tag @FeistyMenopause. Share the show with your friends, and please subscribe, like, review, and rate this show wherever you get your podcasts. Word of mouth and good reviews make it easier for other listeners to find. Thanks for listening, and as always, stay feisty.